But we're going to be learning about one of the biggest impacts on you guys. And if you have questions, I want to make sure that you guys ask me them because this is a topic you're going to want to care about. So, last class, we talked about what to do with teachers at the end of class. Why all teachers fear what? Viral. Going viral, right? We don't want to go viral because if we go viral, it's probably for a bad reason. Now, I had a bunch of people say, well, what about Mr. Law? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, yeah, Mr. Law at the beginning, because I was the one who broke it to him that he was viral. He didn't know about it for like 2 weeks. It wasn't like the best thing in the whole world. In particular, there's a lot of girls that apparently found, a lot of ladies online that found him very attractive. He's married. That was kind of uncomfortable for him. So, but anyways, listen. Okay? But we fear going viral. And we talked about last class, for instance. We talked about like the one about slavery. We talked about that before. We talked about your wonderful ANSCO and why you shouldn't trust the ratings because why? Remember why, what all the ratings are about? The Second Amendment, because we got to protect that. And apparently they wrote it wrong in here. Now I wanted to add one more example, which unfortunately is from where I'm from. Sorry. This happened actually last year. It went mega viral. So basically what happened with this place is this was an elementary school in Middleton, Idaho, which is right next to where I'm from. And they posted online that they were doing this kind of like a team building activity where they had each of the different teacher groups, so the different grades, created some sort of a group. They were assigned countries, and they had to create a group costume associated with that country. Now, what happened is that the images of what these teachers decided to do went viral. So the next two I'm showing you are Mexico. Okay? Now, you can assume what they're doing. So you can say it says, Make America Great Again. And they had all these different things with the wall. So this one was the America team. Sorry. So this was the America team. And they made the walls the border. And this was the Mexico team. Okay? Now, basically what happened is these images went viral. So at this elementary school, a third of all the teachers got on suspension. So they lost a third of all the teachers. Every teacher who was associated with this decided this was a good idea, different things like that. It went viral. In the end, the principal ended up getting fired for this. And then the teachers got their jobs back, but most of them had an unpaid leave, which is the equivalent of about $1,500 a week that you lose. That's kind of how the teacher work things fine, is like it's a fine with unpaid leave. So you don't ever want to go viral. Well, we had a guy go viral in the 1920s, and his name was John Scopes. So John Scopes was a brand new graduate from college, and he was all this new ideas, and if you will make sure to know for Scopes Monkey Tile, the term creationism. Anybody know what creationism advocates for? That God created man. Okay, that's the idea that God put Adam and Eve on the earth and then make babies and makes the world. Okay? Now, the Scopes Monkey Trial debated creationism versus what Scopes believed, which was modernism. So it's creationism versus modernism. And modernism advocated for, if you want to put in parentheses, evolution. So if you just put creationism versus evolution or debates over evolution, that's what works. So he goes into a high school science class and he teaches evolution. Well, in Tennessee, where he's from, according to the state law, you were required to teach that man came from God. It was actually in the state law. And what happened is he was fined for breaking that law of teaching creationism. Well, he says, I'm not going to plead guilty, and so he goes to trial over it. And this whole trial revolves around what is the role of religion in schools? Is the role of religion in schools that you should be required to learn that man came from God, or should it be more science-based? Well, what happens is this becomes like the trial of the century. People from all over the United States, especially pro-biblical people, showed up and they were like, this is what you need to learn. You must do the Bible and you must teach the Bible. So they believed in this. So if you see, you start with Christianity, then you start to move down here, then you eventually turn to atheism, which is the descent of the modernists. Basically, atheism at this point is the worst possible thing you can do as a human, because you are rejecting the basis of God. Now, this becomes very, very controversial of whether or not he should be accepted or not. Well, I told you 2 months ago that there was a time that there was a guy that we would learn about. And we would hear about him later for something completely random that has nothing to do with the original thing we talked about. And it's this guy. Anybody remember who he is? Want a hint?
Yeah.
Populism.
Eugene Debs. I'm not that excited now.
Eugene Debs is socialism. William Jennings Bryan, the guy who created and transformed populism, becomes the lawyer for John Scopes. And he gives this epic thing about how basically you, according to the First Amendment, have your freedom of religion and therefore should not have to teach us evolution. Now, in the end, after all of this, he was found guilty. He did violate the law. However, what you need to know about this is this starts the discussion. What is the role of religion in your class? When you come to school, how should religion be treated? Should it be something we talk about? Should it be something that we don't? What should be its role? So I want to talk a little bit about this role and what is important. So first off, let's talk about what your rights are as religion. So every one of you have some sort of religion or non-religion. So what I mean by that is, even if you don't have a sanctified religion that you follow, some of you might just say, well, I believe in God, but I don't follow religion. That is still considered under this freedom of religion aspect. Or you may be atheist, or you may say, I don't believe in any religion or atheism. I am just completely impartial for everything, okay? Under your First Amendment rights, you are protected to do so. Now, what does that mean for you in the class? So let's pretend that I'm teaching about this. And I say, so this is going into bias, okay? So I say, John Scopes completely was in the wrong here. Why would he teach evolution when God clearly created man? That immediately has now violated your constitutional rights, right? I am now pushing this idea of creationism on you guys, and that wouldn't be fair to you guys. Now, additionally, I cannot restrict the different laws that you might be a part of. So, for example, let's pretend that you are a Muslim, okay? Muslims have to pray 5 times a day, and a lot of people don't know this, but you do pray, for example, to the east. I'm sure you've seen the traditional one where you lay on a mat. However, most students in America, one of the parts about that 5 pillars of Islam says that you can do the prayers in your own head, so you can have a moment of reflection, which is what most students do. Most of the students around you that are Muslim will particularly put themselves in the classroom where they can easily face the east in the middle of class, and then when it hits that time, they participate in class. You never see it. But like at my school, we had a whole bunch of refugees coming in from Afghanistan and Iraq, and we had a girl that every day at exactly, I think it's 10:28, would leave class. And what happened is that all these kids were like, well, she gets to skip class. It's unfair to her. Like, it's fair to us. But that's protecting your freedom of religion. Now, however, does that mean that one of you can raise your hand right now and be like, Miss Ray, I'm Muslim, I need to leave? Does that mean that, like, we can have this whole wave of, like, kids leaving, saying that they're doing their religion? No. Okay, and there's steps that you can be able to get that waiver if you are one of those people to be able to do it. But, for example, let's talk about seminary. I always hear all the time people are like, it's unfair that only the Mormons get seminary. We actually, if you go down to Texas, it's like every single school has a Catholic seminary. And downtown Salt Lake, we have 6 Catholic seminaries that kids go and they go to. So it's definitely not just one person. But I actually know a teacher here at the school who I will not name that is very, very passionate that says we should not have seminary at all because it breaks that freedom of religion. The state constitution has confirmed, and as well as the Supreme Court. That's why on your guys' schedules, what does it say on your schedules? Does it say seminary? It says release time. Then technically that means you are not required to go to seminary. Now, does that mean that your parents are going to get mad at you and you're not going to get in trouble? No, but that's their thing, okay? But you can technically, it's release time. It's whatever you choose to want to do. The only benefit is you don't have to be a junior or a senior to get it, okay? So all this idea of pushing religion and stuff like that. So let me give you some examples. So let's pretend that there's a club. So if you guys want to create the LDS club, or whatever you want to create, you have every right to do it. Or we can have a Muslim club, or a Sikh club, or whatever you want to be able to have, a Jewish club. All those are allowed. But what if you have a club that people don't like, such as the Satan Club? Now, I know this might sound funny, but Satanism is it's a big minority, but Satanism has rose, especially on the West Coast. Washington has quite a few satanic churches that you can be able to have. I don't know if you guys have seen it. We have a satanic church here in Salt Lake. It's if you go near the zoo, it's right over there. So the thing is, though, is that this school created this Satan club, and it was an after-school club on campus. And immediately the school was like, okay, we don't want Satan worshipers on our school, and they banned it. Is that you allowing you to have your freedom of religion, though? No, which is why they sued and successfully won, and they were allowed to have this after-school club. Because you can't pick and choose. It's just like with politics. I can't pick and choose whether Republicans or Democrats get clubs here. I can't pick and choose which religions are accepted or not. So no matter how weird, how crazy, how odd a religion might seem to every one of you, I can think that about my own religion, of how many people have told me I'm crazy, I'm in a cult, all these different things. We have to accept all religions, including ones that might seem odd. Did you have a question?
I was going to ask, what's Satanism?
So Satanism is, so it's actually not what a lot of people think. A lot of people think it's like, you say how terrible Jesus Christ is and all the things like that. If you read the Bible, you would know that one of the stories talks about how they were choosing between the two sons to come down to earth. And then Heavenly Father, God, Jehovah, whoever you want to say, chose Jesus Christ to come down to the earth. So in Satanism, it believes that the correct person should have been Lucifer, who is what most people call Satan. And so they basically say that God chose incorrect, which is why we have so many problems in the world. Why do we have so much discrimination? Why do we have so much poverty? It's because God chose wrong. So instead, you worship the person who should have been the correct choice. That's what Satanism is. Yeah. But again, you can't pick and choose who you have. So let's do another one. What if a teacher has this behind their desk? So what if I take down all my scarves and I'm like, you know what? We need some Jesus at Skyline. And I put this up behind my desk. And this is a real teacher that did this. This was about a year ago. This was on the East Coast at a public high school. And a teacher put this up, and a girl sued at the end of last school year, saying that this violated her rights because she felt uncomfortable with having this behind. Now, whether you think, first off, should that kid have it or not, well, I'll address the person who said this was stupid, okay? Well, first off, what if you are an atheist and you have this that is up there all the time? Or, for example, what if I am Christian and I put on behind my thing, only Christians are great? Okay, well, that's almost the same level as this is somebody who doesn't believe in any sort of religion. So basically, and this teacher too, she made it very clear. So she had a time when, like, at the beginning of class, she would have everybody like be silent, and she would have her like prayer moment every single time. I relate this a lot of times to teachers that do push their religion. So there was also a case a couple of years ago of a science teacher who, you guys know when you go into science classes how they have like the little lab stations, and every lab station had like the textbook on it, but on top of the textbook was the Bible. And so students would have to move the Bible to get the textbook every single day. So the reality is it's more accepting to everybody. So while it might seem stupid to you, especially if you are part of this religion, you have to realize it's being able to accept everybody and all people of all religions. So this teacher did end up getting fired for this. I don't know why they allowed it the whole year, because she had it the entire year up behind her desk. I think that's really interesting. But you can imagine that happened at Skyline. I always like to say, because you know Skyline, okay? Imagine if that happened at Skyline. It would have gone viral way quicker. Yeah?
So, like, if a teacher wears, like, a cross necklace, is that, like...
Well, so if a teacher's wearing a cross necklace, so what she's referring to is a lot of Catholics in particular will wear the Christus. Think about it this way. What if a teacher's wearing a CTR ring? So just because it's a symbol and you're wearing a symbol, so it'd be the same thing as like a hijab for somebody who's Muslim. Those are all just symbols. Now, if I'm wearing a Christus and I know that you're Catholic, so Sage, I'm just going to pick on you. I'm not saying that you are or not. But what if I was like, hey, where's your Christus today? I want you to think about that. And I walk away. Now I've violated her rights. So just because I'm wearing the symbol doesn't mean anything. Or another thing, and I don't know if we haven't had a case about this, but let's pretend one of you is wearing a CTR ring and you cheat. Let's pick on Sage again. So she's wearing a CTR ring and I'm like, did you really choose the right today by plagiarizing? And then I walk away. Oh. Yeah. So that could possibly, and she could possibly complain and say, hey, I'm feeling like she's pushing some things on top of me. Or if I'm wearing a CTR ring, I'm like, hey, you really need to choose the right today. Now, I know a lot of teachers like sometimes make jokes about it or something like that. But you have to realize it's about you guys. If you ever feel uncomfortable in my class, that means I personally have failed as an educator. And in particular with something that's so special to you. So we want to be able to accept it. So just the symbol isn't a big deal, or if I wear a CTR ring or something like that, or a hijab, what's the difference is, what if I have so this happens especially with Muslims. There's a whole bunch of celebrities that are Muslim that you might not even know. And there have been times that people have approached, like Muslim celebrities will approach other Muslim celebrities who don't wear hijabs, because hijabs is a very personal thing. And they'll basically say, like, why are you not wearing one? Like, that's really disrespectful. And if I did that to a student and I was like, hey, you're Muslim, you know you should be wearing this. Or in particular, the AP exam this year is over Ramadan. And so a lot of Muslim students will be fasting from sunrise to sunset. It becomes a huge issue during IB and AP testing because a lot of students will take the late exam because of the fact that they won't be able to eat throughout the day. And the question always becomes, like, that's why the AP College Board cannot reject that and say, no, you have to take it during the regular exam because they're doing a religious festival.
If people approach and teachers do things like this,
yes.
Where is the line between freedom of religion and freedom of speech?
Well, first off, I have no freedom of speech. When you enroll at a school, when you take a job, your freedom of speech is out the window. And that's because you sign a contract to be there. It's the same reason why I can't walk up to you, Chase, and be like, wow, you're being a little bee today. Okay? I can't say that because in my contract, and I don't think you're a little bee. I just want to clarify. Don't get me fired, please. But I should have probably prefaced that to make sure I don't get sued. Mariana, you've been chosen. Okay? But when I sign my things, I put in there, I will not disrespect students, I will not swear, and I won't have profanity. It's the same reason why all of you lose your freedom of speech when you come to this school. That's why you can't tell me off and not think that you might get in trouble for it. So whenever I sign anything, I accept that. So in particular, I know of somebody, like when I worked at Disney, who they dropped a box on their foot, they yelled the S word, and they got fired on the spot. Because that's un-Disney at Disney. And I'm not going to go into that. It's blah, 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 blah. But what I'm saying is, you lose that freedom. Now, do I know teachers, though, that push that freedom of religion pretty far? Yes. Now, I personally don't swear. I actually haven't sworn since I was 5 years old, and I remember exactly when it was. I don't swear, but I do know a lot of teachers who do. And I've heard a lot of teachers that I'll walk past their room, and I'll be like, woo. And at Skyline, that's much more acceptable compared to other schools, because if you did the same thing at Olympus, you'd be gone. So it really depends on your school environment of what is acceptable and not. But again, that's why we always have to be conscious of making sure we're appropriate in front of our students. Now, so like again, one thing too is we also have hate crime laws as well. So we can, for example, I could be charged with a crime if I take it too far. So for example, if I start really calling somebody out, I could be sued. So if I constantly make comments about, like for example, this actually happened up in somewhere in Utah. I don't know if you guys know this, but last week was Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of Lent. And a lot of Catholic students will wear the cross on their forehead out of ash. It's part of Ash Wednesday. You might have seen some students that wore it last week. Well, what happened is that up in Utah somewhere, a teacher wasn't aware of this and forced a kid to rub the thing off. Because he was like, you need to get that dirt off of your face. Now, the teacher did not get fired because she legitimately did not know what Ash Wednesday was and didn't know why the student had it. But obviously stuff like that would be pushing the line. So if somebody has a cross and I'm like, I don't know why you wear that dumb cross on Ash Wednesday. Or like, I don't even know why you wear that. That's kind of silly looking. I've now pushed the line. So even though I haven't sworn at you, even though I haven't directly said anything about your religion, that pushes the line. And as teachers, and really in any sector, you have to be very, very, very careful of what you said. In fact, I will tell you this. I am totally a media, like social media person where I don't mind reporting people for what they say. And I did send an email this morning about somebody on Twitter of what they said because they were going for a UNLV chancellorship and they were making fun of African Americans on the internet and calling them the N-word. So, yeah, I don't mind taking screenshots and sending it. And as an educator, you realize that you are always in front of the limelight. And you guys are very sneaky with your tech. You never know what could happen. And so you always are conscious. I had an incident 2 years ago with an APUSH student that I said something in class, and I was really scared I was going to lose my job. And it wasn't anything bad. I said the word fake news in class. And the mom was very adamant that that did not exist. And it was when we were doing yellow journalism, which is why you might have noticed I didn't say it really. I implied it. And it's because I had said that there was fake news in the world today, and I talked about, like, you know, people doing the yellow journalism stuff. And she was very, very adamant that fake news was a word that was created by CNN and that it wasn't actually accurate. And so I just always have to be careful. I know that was a very long-winded explanation, but hopefully you understood what I was trying to say. Yeah. I told you this was going to be a good day, so none of you believe me. Now, here's the one, though, that I always will say is the most controversial. I want you to try to figure out for yourself. This did go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. Has to do with praying, okay? Now, in terms of prayer at schools, it is very controversial. And in particular, what about a pre-game or post-game prayer? And I know in particular the soccer team does this, or they did do it last year and the last 2 years. I don't know if they still do it, where they do a prayer beforehand. I've talked to the football players, and the footballs have told me, players, that they do a prayer beforehand. Is that constitutional? And before you say yes or no, what if you have a student on your team that's an atheist? Or what if you guys are saying praying to God, but somebody in there is Jewish? Yes?
Isn't it technically personal choice? If you think about it, like if the team as a whole decides, we're going to pray before the game, is that okay with everyone? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, we can do it.
Well, here's what
Or if someone is not,
Sorry.
Or if someone is not, doesn't want to do it, that's their personal choice if they want to do it or not. It only becomes a violation when the coach is like, get down on your knees and pray with the rest of the team. That's when it becomes a violation. Where if someone is just, even though if the rest of the team is praying, if that student decides, okay, I'm not going to pray, I'm going to stand respectfully and just let them do what they want to do, but I personally am not going to do it, then I feel like that's not a problem. But if the coach is like, you are part of this team, you get down and pray like everyone else, that's when it becomes a problem.
So I guess here's what I would say. So here's my first response is peer pressure. So how would you feel if you felt pressured into it? So for example, I'll give an example of a sports team. So 2 years ago with the softball team, one of the things the softball team does every single year is they go down to St. George. And there was a year, 2 years ago, where there was a girl who was very low income and could not afford to go on the trip. And so everybody goes on the trip, and it's seen as this really, really big, like, get-together team thing, and everybody comes really close together. Well, that girl didn't go. And when we got back, there was a huge issue where girls started to discriminate against her because they're like, well, why weren't you part of the team? Well, why didn't you go? And what they didn't know is that girl had no money, and her parents were both out of a job, and so she was working 20 hours a week to pay rent. And they didn't know that. But they came back, and they were so mean to her for not going on this team, she quit. And it ended up becoming a huge deal where we had to reevaluate how do we treat people on our team when somebody can't participate. So I guess what I would say is, what if, and this is, I'm talking about constitutionally, what if you go in front of your team, like, all right, we've all agreed together that we're going to pray. And first off, the whole, does anybody not want to do it? How likely is somebody going to raise their hand? Not a lot. And probably they're going to sit there and hear it every single day. It's very similar to if you were a student and you were in a class where every single day you were beat down over and over and over again, and you just remained silent. We had an incident, I'm not going to tell you who it was, 2 years ago with the teacher at Skyline, who every day had one student that they despised for whatever reason, and every day they made fun of him, every day, over and over and over again for 4 months, until finally they did something in class that cracked everybody in the class, and the class walked out and went and reported it, and that teacher resigned because she was going to get fired. So that would be my response. Now, before I tell you, I want to go to you, because I'll tell you if it's constitutional or not in just a second.
Like for soccer?
Yes.
We call it visualization, so it's not like technically prayer, but people like will pray. So it's like I feel like I don't know, but it's not like exactly a prayer. So people who are like atheists or something, like it's their visualization time. But for people who do pray, it's like their prayer time. But it's never been like said one way or the other. So I feel like that's a good way.
Okay, yeah, and I'll actually address that too in just a moment. Yeah.
For whenever we have like dance performances and stuff, we pray to the dance gods.
Yep, that's one way too. So let me tell you if it's constitutional or not. So this was a Supreme Court case back in the early 2000s. If you know anything about Texas football, Texas is like a huge, huge football place. And in particular, Texas is also very Christian and very Catholic. And so what happened is is that a whole bunch of people started to complain about this. And in particular, there was a school district where their group did this before every game. They got together and they said, all right, guys, let's go ahead and let's pray. You can see that you have the coaches right here that are saying, all right, guys, let's go ahead and let's have our prayer time. 4 atheist students in the district sued collectively. It went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, this is unconstitutional, asterisk. Let me explain why, okay? So, similar to how I'm going to start with you about the coach. So, a coach cannot tell you, now it's prayer time. All right, guys, let's go pray now. All right, you guys go do your prayer thing, okay? They cannot in any way encourage you. So, like me as a teacher, what if I was like, all right, guys, so we're learning about this Christian stuff. Let's go ahead and let's practice praying, okay? Or, hey, guys, it's right before lunch. Let's go ahead and say a quick prayer to each other so that we can be able to bless our food, okay? That would be now violating your constitutional rights. So as a coach and an educator, you have to be very careful. Because if students are like, hey, can we pray? I have to be like, you guys do your own thing. You guys do whatever you do. So that's the first part. The second part is the school cannot encourage it in any way. So I actually address this with yours. So your little, let's have our visualization. That's how schools get away with it. So I have several friends in Texas. They have, right after the announcements, they have a time that's your reflection period. Your reflection period is when 99% of the students pray. But it's reflection period, not prayer time. So it makes a little bit of a difference. Now, in particular, if you are in a sport where you guys pray ahead of time, it is important that it's student-led. So if a student says, hey, I want to have a prayer, does anybody want to join with me? That is fine because that's an individual decision. Where it breaks it is the peer pressure mentality. Where if you start to say, hey, we're all going to have prayer time, and then you start to be like, why is so-and-so not doing it? Or you know somebody's an atheist or something like that, and you are violating that, that's when you've now broken the rules. Anybody know what the only exception is for all these rules? Private schools. Private schools can do whatever they want. So that's why you can go to BYU during the graduation, and they do a prayer during graduation. That's a private school, and that's allowed. Okay? Because my sister graduated with her doctorate degree from a private school. It had nothing to do with religion. It was the cheapest option. It was telecommuting. So she went to this, and I went to this graduation, and they're like singing hymns and like praying and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this is weird. But it's a private school, so it's completely allowed. But I will tell you, if you're like, well, none of this would ever happen in Utah, it happened to me. So at my last school, we had an assembly that we were having. And all the students in my school were a part of the FFA, which is Future Farmers of America. That is a Christian-funded organization. And one of their positions, so they have like reporter, historian, president, they have a chaplain. And the chaplain is in charge of the religious sector. So they were doing this whole presentation, and we had like 50 parents there. The whole school was there. We had media there. And then all of a sudden they're going through like their different things, and they're like, and now the chaplain is going to say the prayer. And none of the teachers had their eyes closed because all of us were like, oh, shoot, we're getting sued. And they ended up actually retaining a lawyer because we all were convinced that we were about to be sued. So, any questions about prayer in school? Yes?
So, I went to a Catholic school
Yes.
for 12 years, and we had a girl that tried to complain.
Yes.
Because you had to listen every day or whatever.
Yes.
And go to Mass every Friday.
Yes.
Because it was a private Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
But when she complained, so even though she complained, she still had to go because it was private?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So I guess here's the unfortunate part. When you complain at a private school and it has to do with religion, you're not going to get far and there's nothing to protect you. So, for example, this is really common in hospitals. So anything with the word Satan in front of it is probably a church-funded private hospital. The reason that's important is because you cannot get certain things performed there. There was a famous incident that resulted in a lawsuit where a lady showed up, her life was in danger, she had to get an abortion to save herself, and they refused to do it because abortion was against the Catholic Church. So she drove 100 miles to get to the next place, she died en route. Now, she sued, and they said, it went out to the Supreme Court, and they said it is a private place. And I know that sounds bad, but you have to remember, though, that's what we have to talk about with constitutionality. So in particular, with this whole honor code thing at BYU, there's a reason why people can't sue. Part of the honor code, which they just clarified, has to do with homosexuality. There's a reason there's been something in the honor code that says you cannot do any homosexual things with somebody else because it violates the honor code. There's a reason you can't sue and say that's unconstitutional. because you've elected to attend that private school. So once you sign that contract, you're agreeing to their terms, and you agree to that with the private schools, which is why the honor code is so controversial. Additionally, is teachers. So I don't know if you guys saw the lawsuit that just got clarified a week ago. There was a teacher at an elementary school in Texas, a public school, and she was doing her get-to-know-you activities at the beginning of the year with her second graders. She put a picture of herself and her partner in costumes. If you look at the photo, there is nothing sexual about the photos. The only thing that is sexual is the fact that they are lesbian. Well, what happened is a parent heard from her kid, sued the school district, and they fired her. And they said that it's because she was pushing sexuality on the students. Well, what happened is she just won $2 million because they said they violated it. Now, in that same situation, though, if you bring that to a Catholic school, you can be fired for being LGBTQ. And that has happened many times where somebody comes out as gay and they're fired. And because you signed that contract with a private school, it's protected in America. So, but you have to decide if that's okay or not. And part of that is, too, is that certain things do violate other things. So, for example, if you work at a church and they have a healthcare program, they can ban you from being able to use your healthcare to pay for abortions or birth control. And that was confirmed by the Supreme Court about a year ago. Any questions? Okay. So, one more thing, too, of just continuing this. This is an example of one example that was unconstitutional. So there was a football coach that after the end of every single game, he would go and wait till everybody left, and then he would go to the center of the field in Texas, and he would kneel in the center and pray. They sued. He got fired. It went up to the Supreme Court, and they did say it was unconstitutional. They basically said that because of the fact that he was pushing his religion on other people by doing that prayer publicly, it was unconstitutional, and he was fired for it. So, and I know it gets really complex and everything like that. You just have to remember we had to accept everybody. And again, Supreme Court cases are always constitutional, or always controversial, excuse me. Okay? Any questions about scopes before we move on? I told you it'd be fun. Okay, so let's move on and let's pull out our Great Depression notes. We only have 30 minutes left. You're fine.
30. That's like half an hour.
I know, that makes me feel great when you guys act like that. Makes my little heart just beat all the flutter.
I mean, we think for the hour that we did have.
I know, we've done a lot of lecture lately, and I know it sucks. I apologize. But wait until we get to the next unit, and we start immediately with a whole bunch of activities, and it'll feel a lot better. We're just trying to get this done before spring break, because if not, B-Day has a test after spring break.
Hey, we're not B-Day.
But we're rated, so it doesn't matter.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, so Great Depression. Now, first off, I am going to be quickly going through this because you should already know the majority of this. You already did a homework assignment, okay? So I'm just going to be hitting the points that you need to care about the most. So, first off, you need to know the three major politicians that lead to the Great Depression. Harding starts basically the Harding's normalcy, so the 1920s. Also, Teapot Dome scandal. Calvin Coolidge is going to be the guy that, in my opinion, I know a lot of people blame Hoover for the Great Depression. Coolidge, in my opinion, is the reason why. Coolidge's politics were very much do whatever you want. If you are right next to Calvin Coolidge, laissez-faire economics, he was like, yeah, we'll just let the businesses do whatever they want. And it all come down. I want to point out the Kellogg-Briand Pact really quick. And if you put next to this World War I, you might see this on the exam. It's basically where we signed a treaty that outlawed all war in Europe to prevent another world war from occurring. And if you're like, well, wait a second, World War II, that's because the pact didn't work. So, yeah, because basically Germany breaks the pact immediately. So, anyways. And then Herbert Hoover, you need to highlight, he allegedly caused the Great Depression. And I feel bad for Hoover. Okay, I do feel bad. He was our heaviest president of about 375 pounds. But I feel bad for Hoover. That's where you get the famous story of him getting stuck in the bathtubs and stuff like that. Taft was that as well, and then Hoover was pretty big too. Taft was over 400 pounds. So.
Oh my shiz. I said shiz.
Mm-hmm. Okay? But, anyways, so one thing though is I feel bad for Hoover because he was blamed for something that wasn't his fault. Okay? Then that's really what happens here. Okay? So, when we talk about, we're just going to skip through some of this. We're going to talk about the Great Depression. Now, the Great Depression was caused by a crash. That's the easiest way to be able to remember it. So you need to know what each of the letters stands for. Because if you end up getting an essay on the causes of the Great Depression, you need to be able to have CRASH in your head. Okay? So we're going to go through each of these. So credit expands is the one I would start because it's the best one to talk about. All you got to know about with crash, or with C, we spent a whole bunch of money. Now, I want you to imagine that you're newly graduated and you get this nice, minty, brand new credit card. And that credit card has a $5,000 limit. And you can do whatever you want. You can pay it back later, I promise. That's what credit cards are for, right? What do most people do the minute they get a credit card? They spend it. Although good on you for saving it for later. So they begin to spend it. Anybody know what the average American person has in credit card debt?
A lot.
Okay, a lot. Great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. $15,000. Now, if you say that that's not a lot, it's a lot. Okay? $15,000 is quite a bit. So the average credit card debt for a person is $15,000. Now, the reason why people start to do this is because when they all of a sudden have money, when they all of a sudden have a credit card, they're like, oh, I can pay it back later. And trust me, most of you will experience this just like I did, where you think, oh, I'll pay back later, and then you never pay back. Okay? That's how credit cards make money. That's why they're very willing to send you credit card offers. When you guys turn 18, you're going to start to get these great things in the mail that say, oh, look, you should get this credit card. Or look, you're pre-approved. They are more than willing to give you it even if you're horrible at money, because that's what they're going to get. Interest. One of my credit cards, which I am finally about to get out of debt for, one of my credit cards every year, I was paying $500 a year in interest. Because I was young, went to Disney, spent all my Disney money on Disney toys, and had to pay for food with my credit card. So, yeah, it was a bad decision. Now, what happens, though, is that when people get more money, they start to buy stuff. So I want to give you an example. I was reading an article a couple years ago on the fact that millennials right now are having a huge problem with credit card debt. They're massively getting into huge amounts of debt. And there was this kid who got a brand new job in New York. He went from making $10 an hour to making about $90,000 a year as an 18-year-old. And he was stoked. Well, the minute he walked into this place, he was like, well, these other people, they got money. They got nice cars in New York, which most people do not have a car in New York. They have nice clothes. They have nice furniture. So what do I need? Nice cars, furniture, and clothing. So he went and bought a brand new apartment. So he went and got a brand new apartment, huge apartment in New York that was about $4,000 a month in rent. Okay? He went and got a car in a city where people don't drive, and your parking spot is about $2,000 a year. Okay? He went and bought all new clothes. That was like the fancy schmancy clothes. Okay? And he went and bought brand new furniture. 2 weeks after he started that job, he's like, this job's boring, and he quit. And guess what he now has? He had $58,000 in debt, plus a car payment every single month that he was supposed to get. Now, that is what happens in this time. So what you need to know for the HC of credit expands is the booming roaring 20s, the booming economy after World War I. The economy booms. All of a sudden, people have money. So what are they going to do with that money? They're going to spend it all. You're not listening to music, right?
Oh, sorry.
Because I thought you took it out earlier.
I did, and then I put it back in.
I don't know if I've had a break in talking. I usually just non-stop talking. It's a problem I have. Okay, interesting. So the economy grows massively, $15 billion more within 10 years. But there's a problem. The top 1% rises 75%. This is our industrialists, our robber barons, captains of industry. 99% of the population, though, only receives a 9-bump raise. Now, that's a problem, right? 9% is not that much. And yet, what do you think in your head? I just got a 9% raise, and what are you going to do with all that money? You're going to spend it. And so what happens is people just spend a lot of money. So I want to give you an example. So when you look at a statistic like this, income massively increased by 1929, right? America's economy is great, right?
No.
This is the average wages. What are you noticing? This, by the way, is the Great Depression, but what are you noticing in the 1920s? Did it grow? No. So the economy grew for the top 1%. Everybody else remained the same. But what does everybody think in their head? We have a whole bunch of money and we're going to go ahead and we're going to spend it. That's actually the problem they're talking about right now. Our economy is one of the best economies we've had since 2009. And yet what are people doing with their money? Spending it all. Okay? And so what happens is people start to do credit. Now here's how credit works. It's literally this. You select what you need. An Xbox, a car, a cool pencil. I don't know what you guys do. Okay? You select what you need, but you don't have enough money for it. So you arrange it in convenient terms, and you enjoy immediate delivery. So I'm going to pay it off later, and I get to play with it right now. Now, I want to give you an example for today. Now, when you guys are adults and you have big person money, and you start to spend big person money, you're going to start to notice that there's this brand new thing, and I've noticed it on a lot of the websites I buy things from, that instead of paying for something out of pocket, you can now pay for it on credit. And so I've noticed this, like I went and bought my big Christmas gift when I got a KitchenAid for Christmas. It's like $200. I could break it up into 5 easy payments. When I bought my cell phone case was $40. I could break it up into 8 payments.
What?
And Walmart has an option too now. If you spend over $20 in Walmart, you can do it in credit. Now you might say, well, why would I ever do that? Now some purchases you do. Like when I bought brand new furniture for my new apartment, I don't have $900 I can drop, so I went and did it on credit. However, what are people starting to do? They're starting to go on things they can't afford, and they're starting to buy things they can't afford. I was considering, but not anymore, going on a cruise for spring break. When I went to go buy my cruise, it gave an option of paying for my cruise in payments. Now, cruises are expensive, especially a Disney cruise. It's like $2,500. But hey, if I could pay it off over 3 years, what am I going to do? I'm going to pay it off over 3 years. And so people are spending more and going on more trips and buying things that they can't afford. We are literally living the 1920s right now. Okay? People are, you guys are like, oh, shoot. Okay? Well, I would say we are living similar to the 1920s with our credit, but guess when the 1920s really was? The 2000s. And what happened after that? The Great Recession. Okay? So, trends, I just want to point out for people who say history don't matter, don't buy things on credit and you won't get screwed up. Okay? So, I want to give you an example of why this would be such a problem. So, we are going to go the bare minimum. Like we're talking, you are living bare minimum in America. We're going to say you pay $900 in rent, so about $10,000. You pay your utilities, your food, your gas, your incidentals. So we're going to say that you bare minimum, like bare, spend about 18 or 19 grand a year. The U.S. poverty line right now for a family of 4, which means anything underneath is living in poverty, is $23,500, which means you have $4,500 to buy everything else. Medical expenses, clothing for your kids, medicine for your dog, whatever could possibly be. So why is it then that the average family, 1 in 3, bought a Model T for 10 grand? Do you have enough money for a Model T? No. And yet why is it that 1 in 3 people have one? Credit. Exactly. People buy things they can't afford. So the next one is reparations, and this one's World War I. So basically what happens is Germany is required to pay 269 billion gold marks. Remember we talked about that before? That's 36 with 16 zeros behind it. That is like $36 septillion in today's money. They're required to pay back all that money. Well, they can't do that, but the U.S. has a problem. The U.S. had the Allies pay them back or borrow money from them. They want their money back. So what happens is they make an agreement. And the agreement is to pay back these reparations. Now, I need 3 volunteers. Who wants to volunteer? 1, 2, 3. Come up, volunteers. Okay. Come on up. It's fine. It's just an activity. Okay. So, these are our 3 areas after World War I. We have America, the Allies, and Germany. Okay? Now, everybody owes people money, about $2.5 billion for everybody. Well, we have a problem. We want that money back. And we know that the Allies need to give it back. Well, here's what happens. Okay? America wants money back from the Allies. Okay? The problem is the Allies don't have any money. And the Germans don't have any money either. So America figures out this really smart idea. America has that's $2.5 billion. Don't mess with it. Okay? She has $2.5 billion. She knows that Germany is in debt to the Allies. So she's going to give $2.5 billion to Germany. Because that's going to help their economy. And then Germany can now pay back the Allies. And now America can be paid back by the Allies. And everybody gets their money back, correct? No. Well, wait. Well, but isn't that the point? Didn't we all pay? Everybody got paid, right?
Germany got played.
Okay, Germany got played, a.k.a. the downfall of the German economy. Did everybody actually get paid back? No. Was there any real money paid back to anybody? No, but how did everybody feel? We got our money back. That's all you needed to do. Thank you. Okay? So what happens is we expected that everybody was going to pay each other back, but it never actually happened. And so the problem is everybody thinks our economy is fantastic. We just earned $2.5 billion, but nobody actually did, which is why Germany had to pay back our loan that we paid off. We paid off their reparations for them, and that's when they paid back us eventually in 2015. This was confusing. You look confused. No, I'm talking about Caleb.
No, I'm good.
Okay. You sure?
I'm just wondering how 2.5 turned into 2 and not turned into 2.6.
So everybody loses a little bit. So we give $2.5 billion in loans, but Germany only owed in reparations to the Allies $2.0 billion. So then they kept that to hopefully reclaim their economy, which they didn't, because they spent it immediately and it was gone. I mean, that's the German economy. And then Allies only had to pay back us more money, so they paid back an additional $0.1 billion that they already had.
So we made
like $1 billion.
Okay, we only made $0.1 billion, but we thought we made 2.6. So it's kind of like looking at your bank account and thinking, I just got paid $1,000, but your bank account says it's 1 cent. That's how it felt. But you think in your head you have a whole bunch of money until your card declines, aka the Great Depression. That was so good. I need to use that more. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Now, American industry is too dominant. Now, this one, basically, you need to know for this one is overproduction. Now, I'm going to explain that in just a second. Now, unfortunately, I want to give you some real-life examples of when things overproduce. Okay? So, let me give you an example. Who has ever seen the movie Happy Feet? The cute little penguin dancing movie. The tap dancer. Okay? Happy Feet was a big success. It was created by an Australian and New Zealand company, and it was a big success around. So what are they going to do? Happy Feet 2, because a sequel is always needed. Well, here's the problem. Happy Feet 2 cost $200 million to make. At the box office, they made $25 million. Yep. And after everything, that company lost about $120 million on that. It's very similar to Cats. If you know anything about the disaster of Cats, Cats cost over $250 million to make, and they only made about $50 million. Okay? Now, that company, though, makes so much money that it's like, okay, that sucks, we won't do it again. This Australian company, though, they don't have that. Happy Feet was their thing. They lose all that money, so guess what happens? 600 people lose their jobs. The company shuts down because they overproduced on something that people didn't buy. I want to give you a better example. Okay? I want you to think back to the olden days when the Apple Watch first came out. The Apple Watch at the time did not connect to anything but music, and it gave you a face. That's it. There was no text messages that came in. There was none of that. There was no how you guys talk to your wrists like this, all weird. Okay? All of that didn't exist. So everybody thought the Apple Watch was going to be the thing. And they produced so many Apple Watches, and how many people bought the original Apple Watch? Nobody. And they had warehouses filled with Apple Watches, and because of that, they had to cut the Apple Watch price very drastically to be able to sell it. Back in the olden days, there was Zune. And if you're like, I don't know what that is, there's a reason. Zune was the competitor to the iPod, and they produced so much, and nobody bought it, and then everybody lost their jobs, and they went out of business. So that's what happens here. American industry in the 1920s was consumerism, right? Buy, spend, credit. Well, then they produce too much. And what happens is that when the economy collapses, they have too much stuff. So here's how it works. You have overproduction of an item. The prices have to go down to be able to accommodate what people aren't buying. That's the sales sections of your stores. Because prices go down, they lose money. To recoup that money, they're going to downsize and force workers to leave and fire people. Because people don't have jobs, they have no money, so they can't spend money. So prices have to go down because people can't buy it, and you guys see how it's a circle. Constantly over and over again. You're actually seeing this right now. So yesterday, I bought my tickets to Disney World because I'm going to Disney World in June. The reason I bought my tickets yesterday is because I have a little flight tracker. My flights yesterday went from $520 round trip to $220 round trip. And I got that notification, you better bet I bought it right away. And I noticed that all the flight places now are saying free flight changes. You can change your plans and it's no big deal. Why are all the airlines doing this? Corona. Right now they're estimating that over the next 6 months, the travel industries will lose $113 billion in 6 months because nobody's flying. I have a friend that it goes back and forth to Germany. He was the leader of that Germany trip I've talked to you guys about. He just got back from a conference in Germany, so he flew from Frankfurt to Washington, D.C. If you've ever been on an international flight, we're talking the big double-decker where all the fancy people are up top, okay? 50 people on the flight. That's it. They lost money on that flight because of the amount of money it's sent to get people back and forth. So what happens is the economy is so bad, there's an overproduction. So Lufthansa is already cutting 10% of their workforce. United Airlines is saying it's laying people off. Because they've overproduced, prices are dropping. We're seeing this exact same trend. Right now, the biggest fear is that the economy dropped due to the coronavirus. People are scared to do things. This is beneficial for me going to Disney World because I'm seeing a whole bunch of people are canceling their trips. But the problem is that things are dropping because people are too scared to go places. And so this exact thing will happen until eventually, possibly the airline industry will collapse. We'll see how long it takes. If coronavirus bounces back quickly, it won't be as big of a problem. But if it continues, then you're going to see this happen with everything to do with travel. And I just saw aerial photos this morning of Shanghai Disneyland and Hong Kong, which have been closed now for 2 months. After they open, it's going to take like a month because it is so destroyed. People have snuck in and graffitied it, like everything like that. The castles are graffitied because of this. So the economy is collapsing right now around you. That's why the Dow yesterday dropped 950 points. So pay attention to this because coronavirus, whether you think the coronavirus is dangerous or not, it is dangerous to the economy. And you have to care about that. Okay? All right. So from there, the next one is stock market crash. Now, if you get an essay on the Great Depression, will you write on this? The Great Depression was caused by the stock market crash. No. This was a trigger, but it is not what caused the stock market crash. So make sure you know the effects of the stock market crash because that's what's important. So, Black Tuesday, the stock market crashes. Now, first off, the reason why it crashed is because it had this thing called a bubble, which was the runaway optimism. Basically, stock market prices rose, and people thought the economy was fantastic, but there's a problem. You could buy stocks on credit. That's right. So I could say, I want $1,000 in stocks, but I'm only going to put down $10 now. But I promise I'll pay for it later. So what happens? Stock market, people are buying. Are they actually buying? No, which is why the stock market crashes. Does that make sense? It also happened in the recession. So right before the recession, people were buying houses for ridiculous rates. I know of multiple people that are selling their houses right now for a quarter of what they bought it for in 2007. Because it was runaway optimism. People were able to get houses before the recession for like $1,000 down. Or they were able to get houses that said, you don't need to put any money down and we'll guarantee that you can get a house. So people bought these things, and when the economy crashed, it was called the housing bubble burst. So that's what happens here. So I would highlight runaway optimism. And on-margin buying, if you want to put under that, buying stocks on credit. So you would have a stockbroker that you would give your down payment. They would pay all the money. And then things begin to happen. And I'll show you what happens. So basically, Black Tuesday, $26 billion in losses. Massive downturn. But that's not what causes the Great Depression. What happens is basically, so this is the stock market. So plummets overnight. People lost all their money. Now, stock market, as you guys know, because I know some of you have been really passionate about like the stock market game that you guys have been playing in some other classes, you know why the stock market is scary. Now, some people love the stock market. There's a teacher here at this school. I'm not going to tell you who it is. This teacher loves the stock market. And they are like millionaires. You just don't know it because they play the stock market. They're very, very good at it. My dad also loves the stock market. Half of my dad's income immediately is invested in the stock market. Now, there's a risk to that. In theory, you'll make a ton of money. So Apple, when they first went on, Apple, you could buy Apple stock for $1. Apple stock now is $490. So think of how much money you could have made had you invested properly. So what happens is that the stock market becomes this investment. Well, the problem is people lose everything in a single day. But that's not what causes it. What causes it is fear. Fear is toxic. And so what happens is, basically, the stock market crashes and people are scared for their money. Now, this is very, very, very important because this is what are called bank runs, and they are must-know information. And especially, you guys will, when you guys are doing your card thing, you'll see it on there too. So here's basically what happens. Everybody is scared that their money is now gone. The economy has collapsed right in front of them. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go get my money from the bank. I'm going to make sure that nobody could take my money again. Well, back then, there was no guarantee that your money was in that bank. You see, guess who else was buying on credit? Your bank. And guess what money they were using? Your money. The bank was only required to keep 5% of the money you invested. Because in theory, when you need it, I can give it to you. And there's not going to be that many people who withdraw things from their money accounts. So in theory, it makes sense over time. Well, what happens when 90% of the people want their money right away? It's called a bank run. And so the bank runs happen where people get their money. And at first, it's no problem. But eventually, guess what happens? They run out of money. And back then, when your bank ran out of money, your bank closed. And guess what you never get again? Your money. There was no insurance. So when you lose your money in the banks, that money is gone forever. Now, imagine today, if I go and invest and put in my bank account $5,000, this happens tomorrow, I go to get my money, and they're like, sorry, we're closed. That's how it worked. Well, the problem is bank closures go all over the place. So, stock market crashes, you lose all your money. Without money, you can't pay your stockbroker. Bankers have no money due to bank runs in the bank broker, so they have to close, and all your savings and money is gone. Now, if you look at this chart, this is the amount of bank failures. So this is how many banks were closing every year. One example is New York. New York, in a single month, lost 90% of their banks. That's 90% of people who lost their money. Now, have you guys ever seen the SpongeBob episode where Mr. Crab puts all of his money in his mattress? Yeah. You guys ever seen that one? It's like spewing money. So that's what people did. So if you ask your grandparents, I know a lot of grandparents. Think about your grandparents right now. Do they spend a lot of money on cards? What do they tend to buy stuff with? Cash or check? There's a reason why. Most people who are elderly do not have credit cards. And a lot of people refuse to have a credit card because of fear of this. Also, I know a lot of people, every couple months, you'll hear of some family who donates a mattress because they don't need it anymore because somebody died or something like that. They give it to DI. DI grabs it and is like, wow, this is kind of heavy. And they open it up and there's money that flows out of it. It's because people were so scared of the banks that their mattresses became banks. It's really interesting to think about. And so my husband's grandparents, they're just like that. They refuse to spend any money on a card. Every month they withdraw like $5,000 and that's what they keep. And then they just spend the cash and that's all they do. So every time they come out to visit, they don't buy any hotels with card, they only pay in cash. And they don't care if they have to pay more because they're too scared of the banks because they lived through the Great Depression. High tariffs is the last one. So after all these failures are going on, you need to know the Smoot-Hawley tariff was passed. And this tariff was going to attempt to basically raise our tariff to make more money. So we talked about a tariff in the past. Tariffs protect American industry. So in order to protect America, we're going to raise the amount of money it costs for you to import things, and then we're going to make all this money, and then we're going to solve the Great Depression. But guess what happens instead? World trade plummets. Because now you can't buy it anymore. So world trade completely collapses. And guess what? Nobody's importing or exporting from America anymore. So basically, in a way to be able to protect American interests, we destroy American interests. Does that make sense? Okay. So, worldwide depression, this is an overview. The U.S. insists former allies pay them back. The Allies insist Germany pays them back. Germany is not able to pay them back, and we see that with the tariffs. the reparations. The U.S. passes high tariffs, nations retaliate, world trade declines, and the world economies collapse. That's what leads to the Great Depression, which is all around the world. Okay? Now, I'm going to end with one more thing really quickly. It has to do with the Dust Bowl, which you've already learned. Basically, you need to know missteps and misuses of agricultural lands. You guys learned about this previously. Basically, what happens is as the economy collapses, off the same exact time, our agriculture collapses. So basically what occurs is due to, and I thought I had a thing in here, but I guess not. Oh, here it is. So basically due to over-farming, due to the inability to prevent this from happening, everything becomes a massive dust bowl. And this natural disaster lasted for 15 years. And when I say dust bowl, I'm talking this is your life every day. Windstorms happen and you endured this every day. They talked about how before you would see the cloud coming and you would run inside or else you would drown in your own amount of dust. Additionally, I want to show you this example. So this is before and after. 1 month difference. Before. Hold on, I don't know what slide I'm on up here. No. Okay, before and after.
What?
Yep. So 1 month difference. Okay, of the amount of dust storm that it happens. Now, also at this time, and this is the last video I'm going to show you before we leave, there was also another problem. You see, can you get that light for me? You see, what happened is the dust storms also brought these bad boys. So imagine your life is filled with dust. There are constant storms. Oh, and by the way, there's these guys too. Now I want you to listen to the sound that they're going to make.
Июля 2015 года, село Чекулак. Вот что у нас творится.
Those are locusts. So again, imagine living your whole life like that. Now really quick, I screwed up and I forgot to show you this video, so we're going to watch it really quick. Okay, here we go. Wait, what's happening? Wait.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, hold on. Shoot. Ah. Okay, wait.
I'm leaving you. Your mom was saying. You got 1 minute. You can do it.
I can't figure it out. Hold on.